In the 41st millennium, there is no such thing as being overly paranoid, for the machinations of the enemies of humankind, the alien, the demon, and the heretic, are everywhere. There is no such thing as collateral damage, for what is the disruption or even the ending of innocent human lives when measured against the elimination of that which threatens the entirety of the human race? And there is no such thing as overkill, for in the course of fighting against the enemies of humanity, thwarting their dark designs may require and indeed demand the death of entire planetary populations. If the Imperium of Man has learned anything from the Horus heresy, it is the truth of the famous words uttered by the ancient Terran statesman Cicero, that there is no greater threat to any society than a traitor. But therein lies the rub. How do you determine who is a traitor and who is not? For indeed, as Cicero himself declares, the traitor appears not a traitor. He speaks in accents familiar to his victims, and he wears their faces and their arguments. More to the point, whom do you trust to uncover the enemy hidden within? If you are the Imperium of Man, then you do this by entrusting absolute power to a group of people that were best described by the legendary war hero Caiaphas Cain as, quote, the Emperor's pet psychopaths, end quote. They are the eternally vigilant, the ever paranoid, the utterly ruthless, the most holy Inquisition. Now, before I begin, I feel a bit of historical context is necessary, mostly because I don't trust what people are teaching in school these days. For those who aren't interested and just want me to get on with it, please feel free to use the timestamp in the description to skip ahead. Thank you. Now then, the Inquisition of 40K is obviously heavily inspired by the real-life Spanish Inquisition, instituted in 1478 by the King and Queen of Spain, who had just recently reclaimed their homeland after 700 years of rule by North African Muslims. The Spanish Inquisition was created originally for the purpose of maintaining Catholic orthodoxy in the new Kingdom of Spain, ensuring that the King and Queen's subjects were in fact the loyal Catholics that they professed to be, and not secret Jews or Muslims practicing their heretical religions on the sly. The Spanish Inquisition is, of course, most famously remembered for its cruelty and brutality. Stories of Jews, Muslims, and otherwise innocent people being arrested on trumped-up charges of heresy, and then being tortured and or killed through various horrific means. While the Spanish Inquisition's atrocities were exaggerated, both by contemporaries and future generations, there is enough truth to the grisly stories that the institution is rightly reviled by modern generations as an example of religious intolerance and theocratic oppression, and has been ruthlessly satirized by some of the greatest comedians of recent memory. The two most famous examples being this.
I didn't expect a kind of Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
And this.
The Inquisition, let's begin the Inquisition.
Look out, Sid.
We have a mission to convert the Jews.
Now, with that out of the way, back to the 41st millennium. Like so many modern institutions of the Imperium of Man, the Inquisition was a product of the Horus heresy. More to the point, it was the creation of a single, and indeed singular, individual, Malcador the Sigillite, the Regent of Terra, right hand of the Emperor himself, and possibly the closest thing the Master of Mankind ever had to a friend and confidant. There are many conflicting sources as to the precise details of how Malcador founded the Inquisition. What the sources do agree upon is this. After the treachery of the War Master Horus was revealed, the Emperor charged Malcador with seeking out individuals of character, men and women that could be trusted to help safeguard humanity from the threat of chaos. Malcador had originally envisioned inquisitors as secret agents, investigating potential threats to humanity and unmasking hidden traitors and the influence of the warp. However, he also knew that there might be times when such individuals would need to take drastic action to destroy these threats to humanity, and that such action might require authority, unchallengeable authority. In order to facilitate this, Malcador gave to each of his new agents a copy of his own personal sigil. As the Lord Regent of Terra and head of the Senatorum Imperialis, Malcador was effectively the Emperor's representative. His will was the Emperor's will, and now so was that of the Inquisition. To this day, if an Inquisitor approaches someone and shows them his or her rosette, then their commands are to be obeyed without question, for their authority comes directly from the God Emperor himself. Most often, this authority is used to requisition whatever the Inquisitor thinks he or she might need to prosecute their duty. Everything from an Arbites riot squad to a company of space marines, all the way up to armies and entire sector fleets. The Inquisitor demands, and the forces of the Imperium, both military and civilian, can do naught but obey. You simply don't refuse an agent of the Golden Throne. At least, not if you like living, anyway. Inquisitors, you see, get very touchy when people dare to question their absolute and divinely mandated authority. Despite being created to specifically deal with chaos, over the thousands of years following the Horus Heresy, the Inquisition's remit has since expanded to encompass other threats to the human race. This expansion of power and authority had its beginnings in the 33rd millennium during the War of the Beast, when the Imperium, still trying to recover from the Horus Heresy, found itself under attack by the largest orc invasion in recorded history. When the Inquisition became aware of this catastrophe, it suffered from a major internal schism. One faction, headed by the inquisitorial representative to the High Lords by the name of Venand, believed that the Inquisition should muster all of its resources and authority to combat the alien threat. Another faction, led by a senior inquisitor named Veritas, was vehemently opposed, believing the orcs to be a mere distraction from the true threat of the ruinous powers. Now, the thing to keep in mind about Inquisitors is that they are fully aware that their authority is limitless, that they are essentially the God Emperor's will made manifest, that they exist outside of any law or restriction. Inquisitors are human, after all, and such power can very easily go to someone's head. What's more, Inquisitors are often selected for their determination and strong individual sense of themselves, which means that often the vast majority of Inquisitors, to one degree or another, are utterly convinced that they simply know better. Better than the imperial citizenry, better than the ruling class, even better than their fellow Inquisitors. Veritas, for example, was so convinced that he was right and Venand was wrong that he attempted to have her assassinated. The inquisitorial representative only survived, in fact, due to, of all things, an intervention by the Officio Assassinorum. This is perhaps the only time when an official imperial assassin was ordered to prevent a death rather than cause it. Veritas and Venand were eventually able to reconcile and come together against a common enemy, but that was still a near thing, and it was decided that to avoid future schisms, the Inquisition needed to specialize and form specific departments dealing with specific threats called Ordos. Those that wished to focus on the threat of the alien formed the Ordo Xenos. Those that wished to focus on the threat of chaos became the Ordo Malleus. Over a dozen different Ordos have been created by the Inquisition in subsequent millennia, but almost all of them are relatively small and insignificant compared to the first two. Another major Ordo would not be created until the 37th millennia, during the Age of Apostasy. After the reign of the insane ecclesiarch Gog Van Dyer, it was decided that the Inquisition should create the Ordo Hereticus. Originally intended to police the ecclesiarchy for heretics and rogue priests, as the definition of heretic has become synonymous with traitor, the Ordo Hereticus's remit has expanded to include all matters pertaining to mutants, rogue psychers, and traitors in general. Unfortunately, the formation of the Ordos has done nothing to prevent further conflicts within the Inquisition, or to make them any less vicious and fratricidal. The only difference is that now, instead of fighting over jurisdiction, most Inquisitors violently disagree over doctrine and methodology. All Inquisitors agree that humanity must be safeguarded. What they don't agree on is exactly how humanity is to be safeguarded. All of the various methodological factions within the Inquisition can be grouped under one of two broad camps: the Puritans and the Radicals. The main distinction between the two is that the Radicals think that it's fine to use alien technologies or even warp-spawned methods in service of humanity, while the Puritans reject this entirely, believing that using the weapons and methods of the enemy makes you run the risk of becoming that which you fight against. As far as most Puritan Inquisitors are concerned, an accusation of radicalism is but one step away from being accused of heresy. Puritan Inquisitors can be divided into one of three factions. First, there are the Mono-Dominants, Inquisitors that are incredibly human supremacist, even for Inquisitors. Not only do they think that all aliens and demons should be wiped out, but also sanctioned psychers, useful mutants like the Navigators and Abhumans, and even transhumans like the Space Marines and the Adeptus Custodes. Next are the Thorians, who believe that it is possible to restore the Emperor to life through reincarnation, thus allowing him to restore the Imperium to its former glory. They generally have close ties with the ecclesiarchy and are always on the lookout for potential hosts for such a divine reincarnation. Finally, there are the Amalathians, Inquisitors who believe that everything in the Imperium is in accordance with a divine plan by the God Emperor. As such, they see it as their job to maintain the status quo until such time as that plan is revealed. Amalathians tend to be the most reasonable and least gung-ho of Inquisitors, as they generally believe in working within the imperial system rather than running roughshod over it as so many of their fellows tend to do. They are opposed to the factionalism that often divides the Inquisition against itself, and are thus painfully aware of the irony that they themselves constitute a faction. As for the Radicals, there are far too many different factions to really list here, so I'm going to focus on the most prominent or historically significant. There are the Xanthists, who believe that chaos should be used to fight chaos whenever possible, the old fight fire with fire argument. The Horusians, who also seek to revive the Emperor, only they wish to use the demon powers of the warp in order to do so. There are the Recongregationists, who think that the Imperium is too corrupt and has to be torn down in order to be rebuilt, which funnily enough makes them sound a lot like modern college activists, now that I think about it. Also like said activists, the Recongregationists never seem to have any consistent idea as to how that rebuilding is to be achieved. Finally, there are the Xenohybrists, who are unique in that they oppose the Imperium's strict anti-alien policy and feels that it needs to work with other aliens like the Eldar and the Tau more often, particularly against common enemies like the Tyranids or Chaos. Given that recent developments in the lore suggest a possible alliance of convenience between the Imperium and the Eldar, it may be that this faction may be on the rise in terms of power and influence. As I said before, most Puritan Inquisitors view their radical brethren as being only one step away from heresy. And unfortunately, 40K being the kind of universe it is, there are many examples of instances where such prejudice is often justified. Consider Exhibit A, the case of Inquisitor Adamara Rassillo. Upon discovering that the Golden Throne was slowly failing, she decided that it would be a smart idea to get involved in a conspiracy to smuggle a Dark Eldar homunculus into the Sanctorum Imperialis itself. She was apparently surprised when the filthy Xenos reverted to type and instead ran off and started ritualistically torturing people to death. For those who don't know what a Dark Eldar homunculus is, for the sake of brevity, imagine the unholy union of Vlad the Impaler and the Marquis de Sade, who then likes to dress up in BDSM fetish gear and loves to engage in the kind of depraved sexual acts that you will only find in Japanese hentai and snuff films. Want more proof? Exhibit B, the case of Inquisitor Quicksauce, who decided to try and build a warp-dampening pylon for the purposes of destroying the Eye of Terror, which is essentially Chaos HQ. Now that sounds good, except for the fact that, 1, he employed a chaos cult known as the Mystic Path to carry out his bidding. 2, he willingly made pacts with at least 2 demons, something that even other radicals would consider crossing the line. And 3, he deliberately orchestrated a terrorist attack on the planet of Thracian Primaris, an attack that resulted in the deaths of over 2 million people, including nearly 200 fellow Inquisitors. There isn't even any certainty as to whether or not this pylon resonance plan would have worked. By the time he was tracked down and brought to justice, it was fairly obvious that Quicksauce was at least partially, if not completely, insane. In fairness to the radicals, though, there have been times where their drastic measures have indeed been successful. For example, when demonic hordes were infesting the planet of Yao Geddon and the Imperial forces were on the verge of defeat, the radical Inquisitor Quarian successfully lured a second Chaos fleet to the planet. Because the 2 demonic hordes were in the service of 2 different and opposing Chaos gods, they immediately turned on each other, giving the Imperials the opportunity to wipe them both out. Still, based on the various Black Library books that I've read, it seems to me that radical methods seem to backfire more often than succeed. So, on balance, I think I would side with the Puritans on this one. But of course, no lore discussion of the Inquisition would be complete without talking about the very thing for which they are the most famous for: Exterminatus. Now, Inquisitors aren't the only people in the Imperium with the authority to declare the ultimate sanction. The supreme leaders of the Imperial Navy and the Imperial Guard do, as well as most Space Marine chapter masters. But among fans, both hardcore and casual, Exterminatus is almost exclusively associated with the Inquisition. I suspect that this has something to do with the combination of the Inquisition's unlimited authority and the utter ruthlessness with which Inquisitors will prosecute their cases, going to whatever lengths they think is required to achieve their goals. Very few military officers in the Imperium, however corrupt or venal, are capable of the kind of ruthlessness that Inquisitors often display. And Space Marines are, in many respects, inhuman, so it's sort of expected that they can do things that ordinary people cannot. Inquisitors are not transhumans, with all the genetic modification and psychological conditioning that entails. Yet the fact that they are capable of such inhumanity, in some ways, makes them even more frightening. Really, the best way that I can hammer this home is to quote an exchange between Inquisitor Horst and Imperial Admiral Spire during the 13th Black Crusade, when the latter questioned the necessity of Exterminatus on a planet that was in danger of succumbing to chaos corruption. Quote, Admiral Spire, "It is said that heresy is like a tree. Its roots lie in darkness while its leaves wave in the sun. You can prune away its branches, even cut the tree to the ground, but it will grow again, ever stronger. Such is the nature of heresy, and why it is so difficult to destroy. Some may question my right to destroy a world of 10 billion souls, but those who truly understand realize I have no right to let them live. No sacrifice is too great, no treachery too small." So then, what is Exterminatus? To wit, it is the eradication of all life on a single planet. Here's how it goes. Usually, the first step is to deploy a virus bomb. The bomb is usually either taken down to the planet's surface and then detonated remotely, or it can be deployed from orbit, releasing its deadly payload. The Life Eater virus, commonly used in Exterminatus-grade weapons, is capable of penetrating power armor and rebreathers, and once it is released, it sets to work causing all organic material to decay into rancid sludge. All biological matter, humans, plants, animals. Anything organic on the doomed world is rapidly reduced to rancid sludge. The rapid decomposition also releases large amounts of flammable gases, which either ignite on their own or by a secondary incendiary charge from orbit. Once ignition has been achieved, the whole planet is covered by massive firestorms, which not only reduces the organic slime to ash, but also burns away the planet's atmosphere and boils away the oceans. When it is done, all that remains is a lifeless rock floating in the void of space. Unsurprisingly, Exterminate Us is only deployed in the most extreme and dire of circumstances: gene stealer infestations, chaos invasions, or if the planet happens to be harboring a particularly dangerous kind of alien or artifact, one that is too dangerous to be safely removed from the planet's surface. None of which distracts from the fact that this is apparently a universe where it's fine for certain individuals to declare genocide on a planetary scale, literally. But of course, this brings us back to the recurring theme of 40K. The fact that this is a universe where things that we in the real world would consider unconscionable or inexcusable is all too often justified. Gene stealers can infect whole planetary populations, reducing the inhabitants to little more than mindless slaves of the tyrannid hive mind. The forces of chaos can literally open rifts in the fabric of reality, flooding entire sectors with all manners of demonic filth and atrocity. Given what the devotees of gods like Nurgle and Slanesh like to do to their helpless victims, Exterminate Us can all too often be seen as merciful euthanasia rather than mass murder. The ability to make that kind of call, to place the survival of trillions over the fate of billions, requires a certain kind of person. People ruthless enough to make that kind of fatal calculus and possessed of the determination to see it through. And perhaps that is why, more than anything else, Exterminate Us and the Inquisition are so closely linked. To the average Imperial citizen, Inquisitors are as much boogeymen as they are defenders. Ruthless to the point of callousness, arrogant to the point of egomania, and driven to the point of obsession. So convinced of their own moral certainty, so convinced that they are right, that they know best, that they will commit acts that most would deem inhuman and consider them a sacrifice well made. For better and for worse, the Inquisition has faithfully done its job for 10,000 years to uncover, hunt down, and purge the alien, the demonic, and the heretical from the body of the Imperium of Man. And as long as such existential threats continue to exist, then so will they. Until next time. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and check out our website at studiobrainstorm.net. And if you have a story that you think is worth telling, we are more than happy to help you publish it. Thank you, and have a nice day.